Chapter 1, Fix Your Hair. The first time he said it, I laughed. I actually thought he was joking. We were standing in the glass conference room on the 32nd floor, downtown Chicago. The kind of room where the skyline feels like a silent audience. The kind where men in navy suits nod at each other like they were born agreeing. My boss, Richard Halpern, looked at me over his glasses and said casually, "Before the board meeting next week, fix your hair and lose the piercing you'll be presenting." He said it like he was reminding me to bring a laptop charger. I blinked. "I'm sorry?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair. "You're talented, Claire, but you don't look corporate. We need polish. Optics matter." Optics, I've heard that word more times than my own name in this building. My hair is red, not subtle auburn, red, the kind that refuses to behave under fluorescent lights. I wear it long, natural waves. I also have a small silver nose ring and a fine line tattoo of my grandmother's handwriting on my wrist. Apparently, that disqualified me from polish. What Richard didn't mention, what he never mentioned, was that I had built the strategy that kept our biggest client from walking out 6 months ago. He didn't mention that I was the one who stayed until 2 a.m. rewriting projections while he was at a golf dinner. He didn't mention that the reason we were even having this board meeting was because my recovery plan had turned a $4.8 million loss into a projected gain. But sure, my hair. "Is that really necessary?" I asked. He smiled, that thin executive smile that never reaches the eyes. "Claire, this is a conservative room. We're not a startup in Brooklyn. We're a legacy firm. You don't belong in that room looking like that." "Like what?" "Creative, different, not beige." I didn't argue. I learned early in corporate America that arguing gets you labeled. Difficult, emotional, not a team player. So I nodded. Understood. But inside something shifted, because this wasn't the first time. Last year, during performance reviews, he said, "You're impressive. You just need to soften your image." The year before that, clients might take you more seriously without the distractions. Distractions? That's what he called my face. That week, whispers traveled through the office like perfume. Big board meeting next Thursday. CEO flying in from New York. Major acquisition announcement. Richard had assigned me to present the growth recovery model, my data, my strategy. But the way he said it, it didn't feel like opportunity. It felt like a test. On Tuesday afternoon, I walked into his office with printed slides. "I refined the Q3 projection assumptions," I said. He skimmed them, nodded. "You're good, Claire. Don't sabotage yourself." "With my hair?" I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't laugh. "With perception." There it was again. Perception. As if leadership is a costume. As if credibility comes in charcoal gray. The night before the meeting, I stood in my apartment bathroom holding a pair of pliers. I stared at my nose ring in the mirror. I remember getting it at 19, after my freshman year at Northwestern. I had just landed my first internship and felt unstoppable. It wasn't rebellion, it was identity. I turned the pliers in my hand. Then I set them down. No, if I removed it tonight, I will remove it forever. 'Cause next it would be the tattoo. Then my voice. Then my ambition. Corporate America doesn't ask for change. It asks for erasure. The next morning, I wore a navy-tailored suit, sharp, structured, professional enough to satisfy the most traditional LinkedIn headshot, but I kept my hair natural, and the piercing stayed. When I walked into the elevator, 2 senior managers glanced at me, then at each other. One of them said quietly, "Bold choice." It wasn't a compliment. The boardroom was colder than usual. 12 leather chairs, a long walnut table, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Lake Michigan. Richard stood at the head of the table, immaculate, predictable. The CEO, Margaret Whitmore, had flown in that morning. She had a reputation, precise, unreadable, brilliant. I admired her from a distance for years. She was the only woman in executive leadership. When she entered, the room shifted, conversations tightened, spines straightened. Richard greeted her with a handshake. "Margaret, thank you for coming." Her eyes scanned the room. They paused on me for half a second. Not judgmental, observant. We took our seats. Richard began the presentation. Market trends, revenue breakdown, external factors, his voice steady, controlled. Then he clicked to slide 12. My senior analyst, Claire Bennett, developed the recovery model you're about to see. Developed. Not led, not designed. Developed. Like I coded a spreadsheet and handed it off. He gestured toward me. I stood. Every pair of eyes shifted. This was it. I connected my laptop. The first slide lit up. Revenue, recovery, strategy, phase expansion. My voice was calm. 6 months ago, we were facing a projected loss of $4.8 million due to supply chain volatility and contract instability. Instead of cutting labor costs, we restructured vendor leverage and renegotiated tiered deliverables. No shaking hands, no apologies, just numbers. 10 minutes in, I felt it. That shift in the room, the kind where skepticism turns into attention. Margaret leaned forward. I walked them through risk modeling, client psychology, renegotiation leverage, contingency buffers. At minute 18, I reached the final slide. If approved, this strategy positions us at a 12.4% projected growth margin by Q4 next year. Silence. The kind of silence that stretches. Richard cleared his throat. "Thank you, Claire," he said quickly, stepping in as if to reclaim oxygen. But before he could move to the next slide, Margaret spoke. "Who closed the deal with Eastmark Holdings?" The question hung in the air. Richard answered immediately. "Our team collaborated." She didn't look at him. She was looking at me. I swallowed. "I did," I said. Another pause. "And who led the renegotiation call last quarter?" she asked. "I did." The air in the room felt heavier. Margaret nodded slowly. Then she said something that would split my life into before and after. But that comes next. Chapter 2? Say that again. The silence after Margaret's question didn't feel accidental. It felt surgical. She was still looking at me, not Richard, me. Richard shifted in his chair. As I was saying, the team, Margaret raised one hand slightly. Not dramatic, not aggressive, just enough. And he stopped talking. "Claire," she said evenly, "walk me through the Eastmark negotiation, specifically the retention clause." My heartbeat accelerated, but my voice didn't. Eastmark was preparing to exit due to supply chain instability, I said. They wanted a penalty-free withdrawal. I proposed a tiered deliverable structure tied to quarterly performance benchmarks instead. Margaret nodded once. And the risk? They were bluffing. Their transition cost to a competitor exceeded 11%. I verified that before the call. A board member on the left flipped through his packet. "You verified how?" he asked. "I analyzed their vendor overlap exposure in prior litigation filings. They weren't positioned to absorb another transition." The room shifted again. This wasn't a junior analyst reciting slides. This was ownership. Richard leaned forward. "Claire tends to be thorough." There was something sharp in the way he said it, like thorough was code for overstepping. Margaret ignored him. "And who drafted the revised contract language?" she asked. I did. "And who presented it to their legal team?" "I did." Now even the men who had been half checking their phones were paying attention. Margaret leaned back. "So when you projected a 12.4% growth margin, that's based on secured renewals, not assumptions." "Yes." Richard cleared his throat again, louder this time. "If I may," he said, forcing a smile, "Claire executed well under my direction. I guided the overall..." Margaret turned her head slowly. The temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. "Richard, she said, her voice almost soft. Did you close the deal? He hesitated. A microsecond. But in rooms like this, microseconds are confessions. Our department, did you, she repeated, close the deal? No, he said. The word landed flat. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked smaller. Margaret folded her hands on the table. Then, I'd like to hear from the person who did. The board members looked at me differently now, not as the red-haired anomaly, not as the junior analyst with the piercing, as the leverage point. I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest, not revenge, recognition. Richard tried one last time. Claire is talented, but she's still developing executive presence. Executive presence. The phrase hit harder than fix your hair, because this was the real accusation. You don't belong at this level. Margaret's gaze flicked to me, my hair, my nose ring, my tattoo barely visible beneath my sleeve, then back to him. What specifically is she lacking? She asked. The question was clean, precise, deadly. Richard blinked. It's not about lacking, it's about optics. Our clients are conservative. Image matters. There it was. Optics. Again. Margaret's expression didn't change. Are you suggesting our revenue growth is contingent on her hairstyle? A quiet ripple moved across the table. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Richard's jaw tightened. Of course not. Good, she replied, because the only optics I care about are performance metrics. The words settled like a verdict. I kept my posture steady, but inside something was unlocking. For years, I thought the game was about assimilation. Blend in, lower your voice, neutral colors, remove anything that makes them uncomfortable. But Margaret wasn't uncomfortable. She was calculating. She looked back at me. Claire, if you were in Richard's position, what would you do next quarter? The question wasn't theoretical. It was evaluative. I didn't hesitate. I would expand phase 3 into 2 additional verticals and restructure our mid-tier vendor contracts before competitors adjust to our pricing shift. And would you cut labor costs? No, we'd lose long-term institutional knowledge. I protect talent and leverage margin instead. Another silence. But this one felt different, heavier, weighted with implication. Margaret nodded slowly. Interesting. She turned to the board. Gentlemen, I recommend we approve phase 3 immediately. A murmur of agreement. Votes followed quickly. Unanimous. Just like that, the strategy was greenlit. My strategy. Richard forced a smile. Excellent outcome. Margaret stood. Claire, she said, stay for a moment. The rest of the board filed out. Richard lingered. Margaret didn't look at him. You can go, she said. 2 words, no emotion. He hesitated, then left. The door closed. For the first time, it was just the 2 of us in that enormous room. Margaret walked toward the window overlooking the lake. You know why I asked those questions? She said. Yes. Do you? I stepped closer to the table. Because you already knew the answers? She gave a small, almost invisible smile. I read the internal call transcripts, she said. You handled Eastmark, not him. My pulse quickened. I don't care about hair, she continued. I care about leverage, and you have it. The word hit deeper than I expected. Leverage. That said, she added, turning toward me fully, you're being underutilized. Underutilized, a polite corporate word for contained. I've been watching this department for 6 months, she said. We need stronger leadership in strategic development. My throat tightened slightly. Are you offering me more responsibility? I asked carefully. I'm considering restructuring it. Restructuring, corporate language for replacement. She walked back toward the table and picked up my presentation packet. Tell me something honestly, she said. Has Richard ever asked you to change your appearance? There it was, the question I hadn't known I needed. Yes, I said. Her jaw flexed slightly. What exactly did he say? I hesitated. Then I repeated it. Fix your hair and lose the piercing. Silence again. But this silence wasn't corporate, it was personal. Margaret's eyes hardened. I see, she said quietly. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about performance, this was about liability, and Richard had just created it. She closed the folder. Claire, she said evenly, don't change a thing. My breath caught. Not your hair, not your piercing, not your voice. She held my gaze. We're about to have a larger conversation. And for the first time since he told me to fix my hair, I smiled. Chapter 3, the audit. The shift didn't happen overnight. It happened in emails, in calendar invites, in meetings I wasn't originally supposed to attend. 3 days after the board meeting, I received a calendar notification from Margaret's assistant. Subject, Strategic Development Review. Attendees, CEO, CFO, legal, HR, and me. Richard wasn't included. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds. Then my phone buzzed. Richard. Claire, he said, voice clipped. Why are you in a CEO-level strategy review? I'm not sure, I replied carefully. I was invited. Silence. Forward me the agenda. I don't have one. Another pause. Longer. Interesting, he muttered. That afternoon, I walked into the executive conference room for the first time as something other than support staff. Different floor, different air. Margaret sat at the head of the table again, but this time there were only 5 of us. No walnut table stretching for miles. No audience. Just decision makers. Thank you for coming, Margaret began. This is a restructuring conversation. My pulse stayed steady, but my mind sharpened. Restructuring conversations rarely included junior analysts, unless the junior analyst was no longer going to be junior. Margaret nodded toward the CFO. We've reviewed the last 3 quarters. Growth is coming from strategic development. Execution bottlenecks are occurring at the department head level. Richard. She turned to me. Claire, how long does it take for your proposals to move from draft to client presentation? Too long, I answered honestly. 3 to 4 weeks. And why? I hesitated. Not because I didn't know, because saying it out loud was irreversible. Approvals stall, I said. Revisions that don't affect metrics get prioritized over execution. We lose momentum. The CFO nodded. We've noticed timing discrepancies. Margaret didn't look surprised. Has that cost us contracts? She asked. Yes, I said, no embellishment, just truth. 2 mid-tier prospects last quarter chose faster competitors. The HR director spoke up carefully. Are you suggesting leadership inefficiency? I chose my words with precision. I'm suggesting the strategy team operates at a different velocity than current oversight allows. Translation, we're faster than he is. Margaret leaned back slightly. And if that oversight changed? My heart thudded once. If oversight aligned with execution speed, I said, we'd outpace competitors within 2 quarters. The room fell quiet. This wasn't about my hair anymore. This was about structural drag. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Metrics, timelines, internal bottlenecks. At the end, Margaret closed her folder. Thank you, Claire. We'll be in touch. When I stepped back into the elevator, my reflection stared back at me. Same red hair, same piercing, but something was different. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was being evaluated for power. Richard called me into his office the next morning. He didn't offer me a seat. I understand you've been speaking to executive leadership, he said. I answered questions I was asked. His jaw tightened. You need to understand something, he said. Loyalty matters. Loyalty, there it was, the corporate synonym for silence. I am loyal, I replied calmly, to the company's performance. His eyes narrowed. That's not what I meant. I held his gaze. I know. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he shifted tactics. You're ambitious, he said. That's good, but visibility at your level can backfire. Was that a warning or fear? I'm not seeking visibility, I said. I'm executing the role I was assigned. He leaned forward. You're not ready for executive exposure. The irony almost made me smile. I've already had it, I said. That landed. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and I saw it. A flicker, Margaret's name. He dismissed it. Then it buzzed again and again. He didn't answer. I left his office without another word. Friday afternoon, an all-staff email went out. Subject, Organizational Alignment Update. My stomach tightened as I opened it. Margaret Whitmore had sent it personally. Effective immediately, strategic development will operate as an independent division to accelerate execution and growth initiatives. I stopped breathing for a second. Claire Bennett will serve as interim director of strategic development while we evaluate permanent structure. The words blurred slightly. Interim director. At 28, my phone exploded. Texts, Slack messages, missed calls. Even people who had never spoken to me were suddenly congratulating me. I looked up. Across the floor, Richard stood frozen, staring at his monitor. Color drained from his face. He walked toward me slowly. The office had gone unnaturally quiet. Every conversation paused. He stopped at my desk. Congratulations, he said, the word tasting like metal. Thank you. He forced a tight smile. Interim, he emphasized. Yes. He leaned closer. This isn't permanent. Maybe not, but neither was his control. That evening I stayed late, not because I had to, because I wanted to. I sat in the glass conference room again, the same one where he told me to fix my hair. The skyline shimmered outside. I opened my laptop and began restructuring the workflow map. No more unnecessary approval loops, no more stalled proposals, direct reporting to executive leadership, efficiency, velocity, clarity. Around 8:45 p.m., I heard footsteps. Margaret stepped into the doorway. You work late, she observed. So do you. She walked inside. You handled this week well, she said. Most people would have retaliated emotionally. I prefer structural responses, I said, a hint of a smile. Good, she replied, because this isn't finished. My pulse shifted. What do you mean? She folded her arms. HR has opened a formal review. Of course they had. Comments about appearance, executive exposure concerns, pattern behavior. This could escalate, she said calmly. To what? She held my gaze. Termination? Not mine. His. The word hung between us. I didn't feel triumph. I felt gravity. I didn't ask for that, I said. I know, she replied, but leadership isn't about asking, it's about impact. She stepped closer to the table. Tell me something honestly, she said. If this role becomes permanent, are you ready? The question felt bigger than promotion. It felt like identity. Yes, I said. No hesitation this time. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Good. She turned to leave, then paused. And Claire? Yes. She looked at my nose ring briefly. Don't ever let someone mistake aesthetics for authority. Then she walked out. I sat alone in the room for several minutes, the city lights reflecting against the glass. 6 months ago, I would have removed the piercing. 3 days ago, I almost did. Now it felt like armor. And somewhere in the building, in an office that suddenly felt much smaller, Richard was realizing something. He didn't lose control because of my hair. He lost it because he underestimated the woman wearing it. Chapter 5. Who closed the deal? The termination didn't happen in a dramatic explosion. It happened in silence. A quiet Monday morning, 8:17 a.m., Richard's office door was closed. At 8:42, HR walked in. At 9:03, he walked out. No box, no scene, just a thin leather briefcase and a face that looked 10 years older. No one clapped, no one whispered, but everyone watched. He didn't look at me as he passed my desk. For a second, just a second, I wondered if I should feel victorious. I didn't. I felt resolved. An hour later, Margaret called an emergency department meeting. We gathered in the same glass conference room where everything had started. The same skyline, the same walnut table, different energy. Margaret stood at the head. As of this morning, she said evenly, Richard Halpern is no longer with the company. Strategic development will move forward under Claire Bennett's leadership, effective immediately. Not interim. Leadership, permanent. The word echoed in my chest. No one objected, no one questioned, because numbers don't argue, results don't debate. Margaret stepped aside. Claire, she said, the floor is yours. I stood slowly, same navy suit, same red hair, same silver nose ring. This time, no one glanced at it. They were waiting. I took a breath. 6 months ago, I began, we were reacting to instability. From today forward, we lead with structure. Clear, calm, controlled. I believe in speed without chaos, precision without ego, and leadership without intimidation. A few eyes flickered. They knew. We will eliminate approval bottlenecks. Strategy will move directly to execution. Performance will define authority. I paused, then I added deliberately, optics will not. Silence. But this time it wasn't tension, it was agreement. After the meeting, as people filtered out, one of the senior managers stopped beside me. I misjudged you, he admitted quietly. I know, I replied. He gave a small nod and walked away. Around noon, I received a calendar invite from Margaret. Subject line lunch. We met at a quiet restaurant across the street. No assistants, no board members, just two women at different points in the same battlefield. She didn't waste time. You handled power well, she said. Thank you. Most people, when underestimated, overcorrect. You didn't. I stirred my coffee slowly. I thought about overcorrecting, I admitted. I almost took the piercing out. She raised an eyebrow slightly. Why didn't you? Because it wouldn't stop there. She smiled faintly. Exactly. She leaned back. Let me tell you something no one tells women in executive spaces, she said. The moment you shrink to fit, they will hand you a smaller box. That landed. I don't promote potential, she continued. I promote leverage. You built it. You defended it. You didn't apologize for it. I swallowed. I just did my job. No, she said. You owned it. When we walked back toward the building, the wind coming off the lake was sharp, cold, awakening. Back upstairs, I stepped into what used to be Richard's office. It was already cleared, neutral, impersonal. I stood behind the desk for a moment, not triumphant, grounded. I remembered his voice. Fix your hair and lose the piercing. I walked to the window. Reflected back at me was the same woman he underestimated. But now the title matched the capability. My phone buzzed. An email from Eastmark Holdings. Subject, expansion proposal. They wanted to increase their contract. Again. I smiled. And this time, there was no one standing behind me to take credit. I opened a new email draft. To executive team. Subject, phase 4 acceleration. My fingers moved without hesitation. Leadership isn't volume. It isn't intimidation. It isn't beige suits and safe haircuts. It's clarity. It's leverage. It's knowing exactly who closed the deal and never letting anyone rewrite the answer. I hit send. Outside, the skyline stretched wide and unapologetic against the afternoon sun. For the first time in my career, I didn't feel like I had to fit the room. The room had finally adjusted to fit me, and my hair, still red, exactly the way it's meant to be,